Connected in 3D, Real-Time Solutions and Digital Twins podcast with your host, Ashley Crowder.
Hi, I'm your host, Ashley Crowder, the co-founder and CEO of Ventana. I've been working in the 3D digital twin space for almost 20 years with tons of business owners and IT leaders across manufacturing to retail, and I get tons of questions around how to use 3D in real-time technology. So I've launched this podcast to bring on some of my incredibly talented friends to talk about their different areas of expertise to help business owners leverage 3D and digital twins across their organization to increase speed to market, improve sales, and many other benefits. And today I am so happy to have Albhy Galuten join us to talk about digital rights management for 3D assets. Albhy is an American technology executive, futurist, inventor, Grammy Award-winning record producer, composer, musician, orchestrator, and conductor. What have you not done? He's produced 13 number one singles, selling over 100 million copies. It's been nominated for 7 Grammys, won 2, and has received multiple gold and platinum records. He was vice president of new technology at Ion, where he invented and developed the enhanced CD used by all major labels. Senior vice president of advanced technology at Universal Music Group, running the music industry's very first technology division, and vice president media technology strategy at Sony. So if you're listening, you might be wondering, what does this have to do with 3D? Well, Albhy has 13 issued patents, several around digital rights management for music. And now as the founder and CEO of Agora Media and senior fellow technology initiatives at Intertrust Technologies, he is applying that experience and knowledge from protecting music digital rights to protecting 3D assets and digital twins, which is essential, especially if you are a business that is manufacturing products. That 3D asset is your IP, and protecting it is extremely important. So Albhy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. My pleasure.
Yeah. So, you've had an incredible career spanning music, technology, innovation. What initially sparked your interest in technology and led you into digital rights management and content production?
Well, I was originally going to be an engineer. I was going to actually study computer science in the 60s. But it was too much fun playing in bands. So I played in bands and ended up being a musician instead. And so I did that for a long time until ultimately got to make records and work with some incredible artists. But I always had a technical bent. I always liked technology. In the studio, I often found technical solutions to problems. It was just natural for me.
That's awesome. And given your experience in both music and technology, how do you see DRM or digital rights management evolving from the early days of protecting music and now to securing complex digital assets like 3D models and immersive media?
Well, let me say a word about DRM. So DRM was a dirty word in the 90s. People were like, oh, you're going to stop my ability to hear my music or watch my movies. And digital rights management is just governance in the digital space. So just like you don't want people driving 70 miles an hour through your kid's school zone, you don't want people taking your intellectual property and giving it away or selling it and not paying you or doing things that are inappropriate with it. And so we have contracts among people. We have statutory agreements around what to do with various content. And all digital rights management does is DRM enforces those rules electronically. So if you have someone who's allowed to watch a movie because of their age or because of their territory or because they've paid money, you allow them to do it. In the 90s, when we got a bad name, it was because DRM was pretty immature. And so it often crashed machines. It didn't work right. They did things like putting rootkits on machines and doing all sorts of things that were nasty. But now it is standardized. Every laptop, every phone, every tablet, every TV has DRM in it. And you don't even know it. When you watch a movie, it's from Spotify to Amazon to Google. They're all protected with DRM. And they're pretty much all licensed to our technology. So we're just, it's part of the water we all swim in now, and nobody notices it, and it is just, it's just part of the landscape. However, it always takes a while for it to get there, and so in 3D space, DRM is not common. There is naturally protection. So if you play a game on an Xbox or a PlayStation, it's not easy for you to copy those assets and do things with them because they're closed systems. If you live in a world with open systems, which we'd like to all be moving forward to, you need a way to protect those assets when they go from one platform to another. So that's why digital rights management is moving from just video and audio and text into virtual space.
Yeah, and it's come up. I mean, we initially, started in the fashion space. Now we work with a lot of industrial manufacturers as well. But they all the 3D model is their IP, and so whether it's Puma or Aztec Industries, it is extremely important to protect that data. And it's funny, I mentioned to you, we actually got an RFP from a company that asked, like, do you have DRM? And I had to explain there is no DRM for 3D yet. But to your point, it is completely standard for video and other content now. So yeah, people are looking for this for sure. But it's extremely complex. So how do you see, this being able to take kind of what from inventing the enhanced CD and working in this with music to apply it to 3D media today?
Well, first there are two basically different buckets of 3D protection that are needed. So you have people, now that you have 3D printers, your intellectual property around the objects that you can print is more precious. So if I am Toyota, I don't want people making illegitimate copies of my catalytic converters and selling them on the black market. A, because they may not work and it may damage my brand. B, it's stealing revenue from me. And so you have this basic environment where you have to protect things as they're being developed. If you are creating new characters, if you are building theme park rides, anything that you're doing, you have intellectual property that needs to be protected. So that's one aspect when you're working on it, how you protect those objects. That, let me digress for a second. There's one difficulty with DRM, and that is you need it in the client. So DRM works for movies and music now because every client, every browser, every device has it built in. And so it works seamlessly and it's invisible. CAD systems don't always have DRM built in, and interoperability among CAD systems is not trivially easy. Protecting objects as a blob is easy for DRM to do. Protecting objects while allowing access to various components of it is more difficult and more nuanced. And this can be as nuanced as you like. It can be just as simple as I have an elven ring that's in a video game that is on my Xbox and I want to take it to my PlayStation. We think that it's safe in the Xbox because it's very hard to hack into that and steal an object. And it would be safe on the PlayStation. And so how do you get it from the Xbox to the PlayStation? Well, you can encrypt it, you can put it in the cloud, you can pay your license or accept your license, whatever it is, and then you can download it and decrypt it on the other platform. Those are closed platforms. That's fairly straight ahead and easy to do. Doing it for components is more complex and more nuanced. So I can imagine a world where I'm not just selling an elven ring, but maybe I'm selling forest background of sequoias. And I want you to be able to build things within that 3D model. And so I have to give you access to the elemental components of those objects, whether it's a background scene or whether it's a physical object or a 3D object. I need to be able to govern that. And so it gets fairly complex. There's some standards that are working on interoperability in the 3D space, but it's still kind of a greenfield. And so just to say one more thing, we all go through growing pains when things start. When movies first started, there were stuff didn't work and people could copy things and steal them. But ultimately, in a mature society, we end up in a place where things are governed. We have contracts among people. You and I could have a contract to say, if I do this, you get that much money. And we need the mechanism to support that in digital space. As we migrate into digital spaces, that is necessary.
Completely. I completely agree. And to your point, there's different levels of complexity. So you have like that single 3D asset, whether it's the Alvin ring or the Puma tennis shoe, right? That I want to wear in Fortnite and Roblox and whatever other virtual world I go in. Versus an avatar or an entire digital environment that you might have a license to actually edit and change for Roblox versus Fortnite or these different virtual worlds. Or, again, from the manufacturing side, a digital twin of a factory, but you're wanting to put in and out different 3D parts. So yeah, it does get very complex, and especially with an open metaverse or whatever we're wanting to call it, the spatial computing world. But I think this year with Apple Vision Pro going live and Quest 3S now coming out and being even more cost effective, I feel like I'm definitely seeing the ecosystem continue to mature with more end use cases and more major players that are going to push for standards. And you've got the Kronos Group and OpenUSD competing for standards, but that's a good thing. I think there always needs to be two, right, to kind of push us forward. But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts?
I just want to say one thing before you go on about physical objects, because it's there's a lot said about phygital, and you print physical objects. One of the things that we're doing is putting NFC chips in physical objects, and maybe not everyone knows what an NFC chip stands. It stands for near field communication. And it is that touch to pay software, that little chip that's in your credit card, in your phone. If you go into a subway in most cities, you just wave your phone, and it uses near field communications to do that. So we're talking to a number of people about putting NFC chips in various devices. We're putting them in running shoes. And then we're doing it in designer goods and in alcohol. And when you do this, you can resell your designer bag, and you can know the provenance. You can not only know that it's authentic, but you can know who owned it before. And you can, just like we're doing this with vinyl discs for records, for recordings. If you resell it, you can have it set up on the blockchain so that the original owner gets paid again. Again, these are contracts. It can say whatever you like. You could say, you can sell it and have at it whatever you want, or you could say, hey, you know what? This recording artist gets 50% of anything you get over X dollars.
Yeah, and I've talked with a few, high-end fashion companies about that, because, the Hermes bag or whatever it is gets sold 10 years later on Poshmark.com or The Real or a thrift store, and the ability for that designer to get a piece of every resale is incredible. Or I'm sure the concert ticket industry, who that's a constant, bots buying up all the tickets and then upcharging them.
NFCs can be very cheap. When you take trains in most countries, those tickets have NFC chips on them.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
They scan them. It's much harder to unlike a QR code, which you can copy and fake. An NFC chip has software, and it runs, and it is secure, and it can be authenticated.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And again, I see this too for the manufacturing space. To your point, the same reason you don't want people stealing your design and knocking it off. No, that's a true, GE appliance, or fill in the blank. Makes a lot of sense. But
also, there's a lot of stuff happening on the supply chain side, so you can track a device to see just how green it is or isn't from beginning to end, and know the provenance. But we're getting out of 3D. But for 3D, if you print something, you know the provenance. And, there is, for 3D printers, they have not gone down there. And I don't know if they would be doing it. But, you can't make a copy of currency on a copy machine, because that's software by, governmental, I wouldn't call it fiat, by by law, you cannot make a copy of currency. And so all the printers have software in there. They will not let you not let you make a perfect copy of a dollar bill. And so the same thing could theoretically be implemented in 3D printers. However, that's, as soon as you get governments involved, things get complicated. And so that's above my pay grade. But somebody could think about how to protect your 3D objects from being printed.
Yeah, no, I think we both were probably drawn to this space, for many reasons. But one, it is kind of the wild, wild west a little bit, and we get to help mold what this future is. So, with that said, how do we balance protecting creators' rights while ensuring consumers still have a positive, flexible experience while using this 3D content? Because especially with that, and just add one thing is, so much about the metaverse, especially with Roblox and Fortnite, it's about people creating their own worlds. They might have something from a brand, but then it's always putting their take on it, so.
Right. Well, I think the thing is to get out ahead of it. So the reason it was difficult in music and film is that the internet made transferability happen before it made DRM happen. So right now, 3D objects are not really transferable. They're not interoperable. And if you add protections in from the beginning, people don't currently have an expectation that they can share, the objects that they create with their friends. They go, wow, wouldn't it be great? And if when they were first shareable, they were governed to say, you can share it, you can allow them to have it, you can make it free if you want, you can have them pay you, you can lend it to them, you can allow them to print 3 copies or 1 copy or 2 copies. I think the answer to that question is that we get in early before people become acclimated to all the free stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I will say at Ventana, we are really helping to make 3D assets interoperable. So we've solved a lot of issues there, but we're selling B2B. So we are a closed system that's for storage and management and distribution by a company. So, we're not quite running into that issue yet. But, if someone publishes something on the web, if you're a smart developer, you could figure out how to grab the 3D model. But then,
So do people resell your designs?
No. So most people or all of our clients are using us as like a 3D asset management platform to be able to store, manage, and distribute 3D assets across our organization for like design, sales, and marketing purposes.
And of course, they would not like you to take their designs and give them to somebody else.
No, so but that's their prerogative. But many of them are looking at, especially the consumer brands, how do we start participating in these virtual worlds like Roblox, where all these Gen Z people have grown up, and if your brand's not there, it's not as recognizable, right, to these kids
Right.
who are growing up in these virtual spaces. So they're all trying to figure it out, and it is that push pull of, what am I okay sharing, but it's keeping it still my IP. So I think DRM will definitely help solve some of this.
Well, and the people who are spokespeople, who are public, who are doing things in these spaces, who want to use their stuff, should be able to resell it. So
Yeah.
if you're wearing my running shoes and I see you on stage, in a virtual concert, and all the people who are in that world want to be able to buy those shoes, they certainly should be able to do it. And that exists today in closed environments. Mm-hmm. They do not exist in interoperable environments, across environments. And to say what I just said before, if at the same time that becomes interoperable, it also is protected, then commerce just begins, and it's natural and it's accepted, and nobody has an expectation that they can just go out and find things and resell them to other people and take the money.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that and you've kind of hit on a little bit, but what are some of those legal and ethical concerns you foresee in industries like gaming, e-commerce, AR, VR that rely on 3D content and proper licensing?
Well, it is you have an agreement when you create content. So, for example, the music space in gaming is different from the music space in most other places. In gaming, you generally do not own the music you create. It is owned lock, stock, and barrel by the gaming company. In films, in recordings, the creator, the songwriter, the composer has a right that you sort of can't take away. But in gaming, they're owned 100%, typically. And so the objects are also, I would assume, and you may know more about this than I do. I'm not an expert at this, but I assume the objects that I create, if I work for a gaming company, are owned by the gaming company. And so they have the right to resell those and to use them. And it may be that if I become a brilliant designer and I have a lot of sort of cachet and companies want me to design things for their games, it may be that I will say, well, okay, but I reserve the rights to resell those objects or to sell them in the aftermarket. Everything is a negotiation, which comes back to what DRM is. DRM is a way to enforce a contract in digital space. That's all it is.
No, and I think that's really interesting. I mean, the Hermes lawsuit, I guess a couple years ago now, I think kind of started to set a little bit of the precedent. There was an artist who created an NFT of an Hermes bag, made millions of dollars, but had nothing to do with the brand, and the brand sued, saying that's our IP, and the brand won.
Right.
So that kind of set the precedent that yes, like if you're a fashion designer and designing for a brand, the brand owns the asset. The gaming company owns the 3D asset you create. But yeah.
Trademark law is pretty good around the world. And there are some countries that don't really respect trademark, but I think you can't get trademark goods in most of the civilized world without permission.
Right, without getting in trouble. But and so I know you touched on it a little bit, but can you explain a bit more about what you mean by a digital contract and the blockchain and how that works? I think blockchain and NFTs got a bad rap with the whole bubble that happened a few years ago, but it's really incredible technology.
Yeah, so let me just talk for a second about NFTs. My driver's license. I won't bother to get it out. But my California driver's license is an NFT. Yeah. It lives in my phone. We're talking to a number of different territories around the world about making car registrations as NFTs. My grandchildren will go, Grandpa, you mean you used to have a marriage license as a piece of paper and a home deed as a piece of paper? Kids growing up today have no expectation of maintaining paper or even backing up their files. They assume that everything lives in the cloud, just like I'm sure my great-grandparents were like, you're going to trust electricity to light your home? What happens if the electricity stops? Well, we come to get used to it. And the same thing I think is true for NFTs or digital representations of unique goods. I'll digress for a second, but there was a period of time when we thought that people might want to make music be totally fungible, so that you could say, I create a network where I've bought a song and I can lend it to anybody I want. And we did some technology using these things that phone company was called Erlangs to determine what would happen if I sold my songs on the internet and I created a network where anyone could listen to my song whenever I wasn't listening to it. Well, what the math said is that an album that would have sold 1 million copies in the first week would have sold 45,000 copies, and then the market would have been saturated and would have never sold again. And so I went to Mary Beth Peters, who was U.S. Register of Copyrights. This is when I was at Universal Music Group. And I explained this to her, and she said, I think you're right. I don't think that digital goods should be subject to first sale. Then there was a company called Redigi that actually tried to do this. A bunch of the record labels sued them. And the Second Circuit said, no, in fact, digital goods are not subject to first sale. NFTs are different because NFTs are not, they're not fungible. So a song that you download is fungible. your copy of the song is the same as my copy of the song. They're fungible, like dollar bills or anything else. NFTs are non-fungible. So if I want to sell a song, I could have 20 copies. Each one has its own ID. So this is just the future of managing things that are unique, whether they're driver's license or marriage contracts or individual copies of, Bob Dylan speaking on my answering machine. It just doesn't matter. Anything that is unique is not fungible. And so they should be protected in digital space, which is kind of what we're about.
Yeah, which believe me, I can't wait till I don't have to actually carry my driver's license around. It kind of already seems crazy to me. And so, apart from
By the way, the airport did not accept my digital driver's license. I had to show them the physical one.
Yeah, I can imagine that. They'll get there. But yeah, so besides blockchain and what are some specific technologies or platforms like InterTrust that you think are leading the charge in simplifying and securing 3D content distribution?
Well, I don't know anybody else who is, you have a couple of engines, like Unreal and Unity that are being used by many, many people. Unreal is being used by many, many film studios. So you have a palette. It used to be when you first had Photoshop, you had, oh my God, amateurs can actually make a drawing or take a photograph and adjust something with it. And now you are entering a world where people can live in 3D spaces. I am much older than you are, but there was a standard in the late 90s called VRML, Virtual Reality Markup Language, which was back in the days of HTML, like 1.1 or something. And it was torturously slow. There's a lot of data, but as we know, bandwidth gets faster, storage gets larger, and pretty soon you'll be able to move virtual objects around with ease. When you go to look at a house that you're thinking of buying, you'll be able to put on goggles and walk around it, and you won't have to drive to Duluth to see it. You'll just be able to look at it. So this is inevitable. I don't know anybody who is in the space except the gaming companies are in the space. The manufacturers are in the space. 3D printing is, you can't design a car without 3D printing. You can't design a theme park without 3D printing. You can't design running shoes without 3D printing. You are using it for prototyping, even if you're not using it for manufacturing. We're reaching the point where you can manufacture things almost as inexpensively with 3D printing as you can in a sweatshop in some country in South Asia. And so you're getting to a place where you'll have just-in-time manufacturing. 3D physical objects are coming. I don't know the space well because I don't work in the space, but if you know anybody who would like to protect their stuff, please feel free to introduce them.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna start connecting. I mean, everyone does. That's one of the reasons, especially the manufacturing companies we work with. I mean, they love the fact that our software automatically compresses and can strip out the internals. So if they are sharing something on an unsecure web link, it's the equivalent of if you went and looked at it in person and had a tape measure to take measurements and try and copy it, right? It's not going to have all the details.
Right.
But no, I continuing to send a lot of people your way. And I believe that the Kronos group, who's pushing for standards for GLB and 3D on the web, has this as a item they want to work on, but there's so many things to work on for standardizing 3D. So we'll see. But yeah, so looking back, at your inventions, including the enhanced CD and your work with content distribution, how do you think these breakthroughs have influenced how we approach DRM today? And I know you mentioned we've gone off tangent, not on 3D, but I think it's so important we don't think about 3D and the virtual world as something totally different. It's like this is just content, and we should look at how we've secured and managed other types of content in the past.
I mean, content and invention are a continuum. I mean, Bach created well-tempered clavier because it was the beginning of when you could actually use the same instrument to play in multiple keys. Before that, each instrument was in its own key. So technology has always moved forward. We have societal needs to govern things. Our societies are bigger than the Dunbar number of 150 people. And so you don't know everybody with whom you interact. And so you need external mechanisms, whether they are governmental or religious or sociological, to manage the way people relate to each other. And as long as we're going to continue to create intellectual property of all kinds, including 3D objects and including physical objects, it's important that we have ways of governing them. So I think that it's a natural flow of things being invented, people starting to use them, and then people trying to build commerce out of them and trying to learn how to govern them and to both protect their intellectual property and benefit from them and share it as they want, but not share it if they don't want.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And so, with that said, what trends do you see or are you most excited about for the future of DRM, especially as it pertains to interactive, immersive media and even, AI generated content, the buzzword around, but we can't get around it. It's everywhere now.
Well, I mean, I think that location-based entertainment, places like the Dome, are very, it's not exactly VR, but it is certainly immersive and it is certainly engaging. I think that VR is one application. It's very good in industry. Some VR games are fun. There is always the problem of walking around and running into things and living. It's hard to be physical when wearing VR goggles to know what you're doing. I think AR is a natural. I think that AR, just like the phone, it became part of everybody's life. And I think you already should be able to expect to look at your phone and see, is this restaurant any good? You will soon be able to do that with your glasses, whether they're sunglasses or they are camera capture glasses, and you will be a space that'll be landscape that people will control and manage. And again, my grandchildren will come to expect when they walk by a restaurant that they'll be able to see the menu in the window. They won't have to have a piece of paper. They'll be able to see the ratings. They'll be able to know how good people are. They'll be able to go on a tour around a city. They'll be able to find their way home just by asking for directions, not staring at their phone walking in front of a car, but they will actually be able to get that in their glasses. So I think that AR is a more intuitive and a more immediate function. And I think that VR is for immersive experiences in limited physical settings and for industrial applications. Being able to wear goggles and work on an automotive or on an engine in your car and see what the parts are and see where they are, and then be able to order them from your glasses while you're looking at it, and maybe print it, in your printer, and then go upstairs and get it and stick it in your car. I think that is, that's a lovely future that generations beyond us will come to take as normal.
Seriously, yeah. My dad would love that. He keeps appliances forever to the point where they no longer make the parts needed to replace in the stove in the kitchen.
Right.
And if you could just exactly 3D print the design, the original manufacturer could still get a piece of that yep. money, right? But they wouldn't have to keep the die and all the expensive, equipment to keep manufacturing.
Or the warehousing.
Yeah.
I mean, supply chain management is a huge problem. And anytime there's a disruption, whether it's a boat crashing into a bridge or, or COVID, supply chain disruptions are incredibly challenging. And the more we can do manufacturing just in time, the greener it is and the less overhead we have with storage. Sorry, you people have warehouses, but I hope that one day we don't need so many of them.
Yeah, it'll truly be like the Jetsons, where you can just type in and it 3D prints. I don't want to leave off without asking, what advice would you give creators, technologists, and companies as they navigate the challenges of securing their digital assets and rights in this increasingly 3D and immersive world?
I would say leave your paradigm at the door. So when you walk into any environment, try to think like you don't know anything about it. there are some great studies that show that many of the most incredible inventions or discoveries are from people from outside of their normal vertical. So I like that the guy who found the solution to getting the oil off the Straits floor of the Alaskan Straits after the Exxon Valdez crash was someone who was not a metallurgical engineer, was not an oceanographic engineer. He was someone who had worked in construction sites when he was young, and he went, "Oh, the way they pound the concrete so that it liquefacts, I guess would be the correct term, so that it gets more liquid and you can suck it up. Why don't we try that with the oil and we can suck it out?" And so it's important to look at every environment, forget your history, forget your expectations, and look at what it is that we could do and say, okay, I imagine in a world where I'm going to want to sell this or I'm going to want to use this. How can I make sure that happened? Who will try to take it? Who will want to use it? How will they use it? What will happen when they try to use it? And how can I, A, help the end customer to make it as intuitive as possible, and B, make sure that the creators are actually paid?
Yeah, I completely agree that my co-founder and I constantly say, okay, we're gonna throw everything in the kitchen sink on the table, even if we think it's a bad idea, right? Or we don't want to go this route. We just got to know all the options that are possible. And so with that said, do you see a future where DRM becomes seamless and invisible to consumers, but effective for creators and rights holders, and how do we get there?
Absolutely. You build into the standards before everybody and their grandmother has a 3D printer and the designs are all over the internet. And if you want to say, I'm going to buy a knockoff of a catalytic converter, and I know it's a knockoff, but it's cheap, that's probably hard to stop that. But if I want a legitimate one, then I want to know that it's legitimate, and we need a process for determining what's legitimate and for people to know what's real and what's not. And if we get there before, there's very little 3D interoperability today. Almost nothing travels. If we get there before it becomes interoperable, then we will have a governed world and no one will know it in any other way.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to see what Intertrust and you continue to develop for the 3D space and help our clients implement that. So, Albhy, thank you so much for joining me. This was such an interesting conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. What a pleasure. Have a great day.
You too.